Hey, welcome back to Sober Now. I'm Jim LaPierre. Today we're going to be talking about coming back from burnout. It's a tough topic, but it's one that we need to be talking about because personally and professionally, people burn out. It's common in recovery. It's common, especially for those of us who are dedicated to serving others, whether personally, professionally, or both. So the biggest cause of burnout is something that's very simple. It's referred to as compassion fatigue. And I always think of it in terms of the expression, you can't pour from an empty cup. So when we serve others, when we are there for them emotionally, when we are doing our best to be loving and kind and patient and tolerant to the people that we care about, it takes a little bit out of us, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more. And so if we don't have reciprocity in our lives, if we don't have people that support us to offset what we give to others, gradually we become drained. And if we do that long enough, we become exhausted, our immune system gets shot, we get sick very easily, and we just find ourselves feeling kind of low and maybe even irritable. And in these cases, what we've done is gone past our own limits. And that's the thing about people like us. While we have respect for other people's limits, we tend to push our own. And while we tend to have a lot of empathy for other people, we tend to lack compassion for ourselves. So compassion fatigue is something that's easy to correct, but it requires that we get as comfortable with receiving support and love and all of those great things as we are at giving them. And what I notice is giving's easier. It requires less vulnerability. It seems to come naturally to us, and letting folks be there for us is oftentimes very uncomfortable. But there are certain inevitabilities to this, and maintaining things that are manageable and sustainable needs to be part of our focus. The other big piece that leads to burnout are what a counselor would call vicarious and secondary trauma. So as we bear witness to the suffering of others, as we support their transformation, their recovery, sometimes we listen to stories, sometimes we just hold somebody as they cry, sometimes these things can stick with us. We're sponges. We tend to take everything in. If you have a lot of empathy, chances are you don't just feel for the person, you actually connect to the emotion that they're describing. Maybe you've had a similar experience, maybe you haven't, but the point is, subconsciously, we take on their fear as though it were our own, we take on their pain as though it were our own, and sometimes we even take on their problems as though they were our own. And we don't mean to do this, but gradually we find that it takes a toll. We may find ourselves preoccupied or thinking about things that in truth we're powerless over, but we may still feel compelled to act on. So those types of really draining emotional experiences are things that are best to process with a counselor or a coach, maybe a sponsor, maybe just with good friends. But don't struggle with those things alone. Make sure that you're drawing on supports. And if you don't have those people in your life, then it's time to really reevaluate whether the support you give to others is going to be sustainable in the long term. You might be like me. I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof for a lot of my career, and I experienced burnout both personally and professionally multiple times. And like I always say, I didn't get better because it was a good idea or because it was the right thing to do. I overcame burnout because I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. But what I see most people do when they burn out is they'll maybe take a few sick days, maybe they'll even take a week's vacation from work or from other responsibilities. And then what they'll do is go back to exactly the same routines and expectations that burned them out in the first place. So, ideally, when we experience burnout, we take a step back and we become rigorously honest with ourselves and others about what we've been undertaking, what our expectations and standards that we set for ourselves were, and we allow for some outside input about whether or not those are sustainable. And then we make some changes so that we don't keep going through the same patterns and cycles. Breaking patterns is pretty easy. All we have to do is do something differently. If you're stuck, if you really can't see a way out of this, then take another step back. Imagine it's a friend in your shoes. What are you going to tell them to do? And I bet that gives you a little more clarity. We're folks who push ourselves very hard. We usually do so with great intentions and with a big heart, but it takes a toll. And if you're like me, you're going to go through that until you can't stand it anymore. So I'm hoping that you'll make this investment in yourself. You'll want to be supportive and available to those you love and care about, but you're going to temper that with making sure that you have an equal amount of support coming into your life. If you have questions about burnout and how to come back from it, please email me, jim@sobernow.com. I'd love to get your questions. I'd love to see suggestions of topics that you'd like covered, and we can expand this conversation. I'd love to have you hit a like button and a subscribe button on our YouTube channel, which is Sober Now. And I hope you'll share the videos with friends and family so that we can continue. Thank you. Take care of yourself. Have a great day.